Welcome to Hebraic Insights in the Gospels. Join us every Sabbath on Zion Road Radio for a look at the life, deeds, and words of Yeshua Messiah and his followers from the Torah-centric Hebraic perspective they were originally lived and written in.
Stand at the crossroads and look. Ask for the ancient paths. Ask where the good way is, and walk in it, and you find rest for your souls. You find rest for your souls. Oh, you find rest for your souls when you walk in his way.
Today's program is on John chapter 18, verse 1 through verse 27. Please get out your Bible and follow along. Who were the Nazarenes, and what did they have to do with Messiah's identity? Was Messiah expressing his divinity in answering, "I am"? Considering the fact that Yeshua is divine, was Judas the only betrayal he ever suffered? How has God dealt with betrayal and the possibility of betrayal throughout history? And if we obey him, can we expect to be betrayed as he has been betrayed? How do we deal with betrayal when it comes, and how can we avoid becoming the betrayer? Stay tuned throughout today's program for the answer to these questions and more in John chapter 18, verse 1 through verse 27. And now, here's Eliyahu ben David.
Stand at the crossroads and look. Ask for the ancient paths. Ask where the good way is, and walk in it.
Shabbat Shalom, friends. Great to have you with us once again. We have a very serious subject. It's entitled Treachery Unleashed. And we're looking at an incident of betrayal. And I think when we look at betrayal, it's kind of serious topic because many of us have experienced betrayal at one point or another in our life. And if we haven't experienced it, we don't want to experience it. And so it's kind of an off-putting subject in a way, and yet it's so very, very important for us because we know that the scriptures tell us a time of great betrayal is ahead of us, and we do need to be prepared for what's coming. This starts with John 18, 1 through 3, which sets up this whole picture, this beginning, really, of Yeshua's ordeal on that night before his death. John 18, 1 through 3, when Yeshua had spoken these words, he went out with his disciples over the brook Kidron, where there was a garden, into which he and his disciples entered. Now Judah, who betrayed him, also knew the place, for Yeshua often met there with his disciples. Judah then, having taken a detachment of soldiers and officers from the chief priests and the Pharisees, came there with lanterns, torches, and weapons. They were ready. They were ready. I wonder how many men they had with them to apprehend this one man. I'm just thinking, if you're up there on the Mount of Olives, you would see them coming for quite a long way. Because being elevated up in the air like that and being able to look down into the valley, you would see all those torches and they were coming in your direction. Makes me think that if Yeshua wanted to be scarce, he could have been. But that was not the plan. Maybe some of those people kind of hoped that's what would happen. I know if I was one of them, that's how I would feel. You just don't really know what they were thinking. But they were coming for him. It says, Yeshua, therefore, knowing all the things that were happening to him, went forth and said to them, who are you looking for? They answered, Yeshua the Nazarene. Now, one thing that I would mention about this is already this is highly unusual. Here you have a band of people with torches and weapons, and you know they're coming to get you. What usually happens in that situation? Have you ever seen Dog the Bounty Hunter? What do the people do? They always run, don't they? They always run. What kind of man just walks out and basically says, hey, are you looking for me? You know, just on the level of a man, is this not a man different than other men? A man that you have to respect even if you don't see him for who he truly is. They answered, Yeshua the Nazarene. Now, in the version of the scriptures that we're using, it says Yeshua of Nazareth. And I've changed this verse to Yeshua the Nazarene. And why have I done that? Well, let me show you. We have in the verse here the Greek word that is indicated in Strong's dictionary. And it's actually Nazareos is the Greek word. And it is a different word than the word that is translated correctly as Nazareth. And we have another place where this word is used, Acts 24:5, where it's talking about Paul. And it's quoting the adversaries there, talking about Paul, calling him a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes. And this is the same Greek word, Nazareos. The sect of the Nazarenes is different than the town of Nazareth, especially when you realize that at the time that Paul was doing this work, he was traveling even outside of Judea. He was traveling to cities all over the Roman Empire. And so if he is a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes, he's not a ringleader in Nazareth, of a group in Nazareth. This is talking about something bigger. This is talking about a sect, or in other words, a group of people. And these are the Nazareos. And we translate that as Nazareans. It comes from the Hebrew word that we translate as Nazarite, or one separated. That's talking about Yeshua. One separated, one set apart. The Holy One. And the word Nazareth is an entirely different word, and it means the guarded one. So what they were looking for is Yeshua, the Nazareos. In English, the Nazarene. He was part of this particular group. Now, who were they? Well, let's look into some things to understand this better. We're going to take a little circuitous route here on a few things, but we will be getting back to this shortly. The first thing we have to realize is that the Jews identified the Messiah as the eternal Elohim. Now, this is different than the Jews today. The Jews today essentially say the Messiah is an especially anointed person, essentially a religious superhero. What they believed in the first century, though, is that the Messiah was actually a manifestation of the eternal Elohim. Now, here's some proof of this. Isaiah 9:6. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders. His name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty Elohim, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Now, surely the mighty Elohim is speaking about deity. But this becomes even more interesting as we look at Targum Isaiah, because Targum Isaiah, this is the English translated from the Aramaic, and this was read in the synagogues, and this is an interpretation of the verse rather than an exact literal rendering of the verse. And this interpretation shows you what they were actually teaching in the synagogue about the Messiah. And there it says that he's the mighty God who liveth to eternity, the Messiah. So this is so clearly, even more so than the original text, equates the mighty God with the Messiah as one and the same. This is what they believed and knew to be true, that the Messiah was in fact the mighty God. And we have this verified for us in the Targum and in other sources. Now, understanding that, in Isaiah, if we just go then carrying the thought of Isaiah forward, in 2 chapters away from that, in Isaiah chapter 11, the very first verse, it's telling us about where the Messiah would come from. And it says, a shoot will come out of the stalk of Jesse, and a branch out of his roots will bear fruit. And it's interesting how Targum Isaiah interprets this, saying, a king shall come forth from the sons of Jesse, and from his children's children the Messiah shall be anointed. Now that's very interesting, because it's talking here then about a lineage or a genealogy. And the word that it's quoting from, that is literally interpreted as branch, is the word netzer, the Hebrew word netzer. And it literally means a shoot, a branch, or a twig. Another interpretation of this, another meaning is to watch over or guard in order to preserve. And basically, what this is talking about in Isaiah is a group of people of the house of David who were set in place to guard the royal lineage until the branch should arise, the Messiah should arise. It's talking about guarding that royal line unto the coming of Messiah. Now, interestingly, we have some historical information from church history. Now, this is a book that was written in, I'm pretty sure, the 3rd century or the 4th century. And it's giving a history going back to that 1st century. And it's quoting from various different sources and kind of compiling it together. And it tells us the story there of how Herod destroyed the public records of the genealogy of the house of David because he was an Edomite, but he wanted to claim that he was of the house of David because it was the house of David that was given the position of rulership in Israel. So he wanted to lay claim to that, but as long as the records actually existed, then people could tell he was lying. So his remedy for that was to destroy the public records so you couldn't go and check up what he was saying. Things don't change much over time, do they? Same stuff is happening right now on the internet, friends. A lot of truth, history, facts are quickly disappearing. And not only from the internet, but from your public library. A lot of these books are disappearing. And they're being replaced with, by and large, a lot of fluff and very little facts. And why is that happening? Because there is an agenda. Just like Herod had an agenda to present himself a certain way, there is an agenda that's being formed. And some of us older people, we remember history, but we're not going to be around forever. And the system thinks they are going to be around forever. And so by doing this, they can fool the generation coming up to believe their version of things. This, by the way, is also why they want to tear down statues and other kinds of monuments and so forth to destroy a record of history. Now, let me tell you, this is supposed to be an enlightened age, but an age in which books are burned and historical monuments, documents, and things like this are destroyed is an age of darkness, not an age of enlightenment. But getting back to my point about Herod, this is what he did. Herod did this. And so the family of David then resorted to preserving their own records. Now, of course, they had been doing this all along, right? They had been preserving their own records. And so that's what they did. And it mentions here about certain ones who became called the Despotini. Now, this is a Greek term, and it refers to those who were of the family of Yeshua Messiah. It means of the Lord. This is the family of Yeshua Messiah. Now, in recent times, they have messed with the history through the books of Dan Brown and others, and they have presented the Despotini as being Yeshua married to Mary Magdalene and them producing children. All of that is nonsense, but the Despotini was very real, and they were the people who were the family of Yeshua. And it says in the history that they came from a place called Nazareth, and also another place called Kakaba. There were two messiahs, a real one and a false one. The real one came from Nazareth, also known as Nazareth, and the false one came from Kakaba later on. That's the guy, Bar Kokhba. That's right. So what I'm telling you is that the reason they were after Yeshua, the Nazarene, is not because he was from Nazareth. It was because he was from the sect of the Nazareans. In other words, this group of Davidians who preserved the royal lineage from which Yahweh brought forth the Messiah of Israel. And I couldn't go by this without explaining this to you, even though I have explained this in far more detail in the On the Road to Zion series, and I would encourage you to look this up and look into it more. This is not something you're going to find very easily, but it is very much a fact, and it's very relevant to us today. So this is what they were doing there, is guarding the royal line of David, the Messiah. So that's what they were looking for. That's why they said that they were looking for Yeshua the Nazarene. You know, from a certain point of view, he represented the leader of another sect of Judaism. That's how they regarded it. He was the leader of another sect of Judaism. And I think, as we have even seen in political events of this day, very, very often one sect or political group will want to destroy somebody who is the leader of another sect or political group. Of course, nothing like that could be going on right now. But those things do happen. So it's kind of interesting as we look at the Gospels. Near the very beginning of the Gospels, in the second chapter of Matthew, it introduces us to this. And it uses the same term, and it tells us there about this. And now we're getting to the end of the story in the book of John, and Yeshua is entering in now to his ordeal, and it's bringing all this up again about where he's from and who he actually is. I think that's really very interesting. And I'm not sure whether the Greek-speaking people that read the book of John fully understood this, but if you have a background in the Tanakh and have some knowledge of these events that happened there in Judea, then you would understand it. So probably some understood it and some didn't. So at any rate, what was happening there is they were accusing him of being of the sect of the Nazarenes, and he was owning it. In fact, he was stepping up to own it. Yeshua, therefore, knowing all the things that were happening to him, went forth and said to them, "Who are you looking for?" They answered him, "Yeshua the Nazarene." Yeshua said to them, "I am." Now, I left he off of there. I just kind of put it in gray because it isn't there. It's not there. If you look, for instance, using your Strongs, and you read this with all of the Strong's numbers, you'll notice it has no Strong's number on the word he. So this is put into the translation, and I'm sure there's some justification for this, but the words he actually said was, "I am." And this is very significant for him to say this. In a way, he's already said it, right? Because he's basically in owning the fact that he is the Nazarene, the leader of the Nazarenes, therefore the Messiah. He's owning who he is, and he's owning that he's divine in their teachings. But now he's saying, "I am." And this is really especially stunning. And this originates in Scripture in Exodus chapter 3, where Yahweh is speaking as Elohim to Moses, revealing the meaning of his name, saying, "I am has sent me to you." This is what he is to say to Israel. "I am has sent me to you." And then he gives the fuller name, Yahweh, the Elohim of your fathers, the Elohim of Abraham, the Elohim of Isaac, the Elohim of Jacob. Well, Yahweh comes from this verb that we translate as "I am." And he says, "This is my name forever, and this is my memorial to all generations." So this is the memorial name of the divine creator, summed up in these two words, "I am." And just to verify what I'm saying, you can see here where it says, "I am has sent me to you" in Exodus. It's the Hebrew verb, heye, which means to be, become, come to pass, exist, happen. And the Greek word in the book of John, where Yeshua says, "I am," it's the word emi. It means to be, to exist, to happen, to be present. So it's as close a translation of the Hebrew as you could possibly do in Greek, he clearly is saying the same thing. And you wouldn't say this if you didn't want it to be understood for what it is because of the consequences. So he obviously was saying, that's who he was. I am. And it mentions that Judas was there who betrayed him almost as an afterthought here. Doesn't really say much about Judas. But then it says, when therefore he said to them, I am, they went backward and fell to the ground. So I think that there was a divine manifestation in his words. They were seeing the glory of I am before them, and it just totally knocked them off their feet. Now, they might not have understood what was happening, but it seems that that is what was happening. By the way, what we've seen here now is it's used the same terminology twice. So it says it in John 18:5, and then here it says it again. When therefore he said to them, I am, they went backward and fell to the ground. So it repeats it now a second time here in the book of John. Then we go ahead one more time. It says, again, therefore, he asked them, who are you looking for? So apparently they're still stunned. And they said, Yeshua the Nazarene. Yeshua answered, I told you that I am. So here he tells them this, or it's recorded here in John 3 times. I think that's significant. I don't think you have to say this 3 times to understand the story. And so to me, it's very deliberate that it's in here in this short amount of space in this passage 3 times. And each time it's the same words that are translated as I am. So Yeshua was amazing in what he did. He was amazing as a man in his courage, but also he was stepping right up, owning his divinity. And he did it in a way that totally knocked them off their feet. So it was filled with the power of divinity as well as the words. Is there any doubt that they would know that this was not an ordinary man? Well, here I'm departing from the verses. The verses have been covered very well. And what I got into here as I was studying this, and I was realizing, everybody thinks that Judas is the worst betrayer that ever lived. Like, his name is synonymous with being a betrayer. And from a certain point of view, that's true. But from another point of view, he's an insignificant ant. He's a big nothing. What we call today a nothing burger. Yahweh has been betrayed by a lot better than Judas. And he's been betrayed more than anybody. He's really good at being betrayed. He knows how to handle being betrayed. Did Yeshua have any trouble being betrayed? He totally was on top of his game, wasn't he? And I'll tell you what, if you're ever betrayed, you would do as well to be as calm as he was. People don't do well when they're betrayed. Usually it comes as a big surprise, stirs up all kinds of emotions, many times emotions they never knew they had. And more than a few times, people end up getting killed. He's been betrayed. And you know what? What surprises me is that in doing my research on this, nobody really talks about that. Maybe they think because he's God, it doesn't matter or it doesn't hurt. But I'll tell you something, being betrayed hurts. And if you're God, it only hurts more because he is more aware of everything. We're going to revisit a few things we've talked about in the past. Look at this history. Our grand creator created everything perfect, wonderful for all of his creatures in heaven and on earth. Everyone was blessed with life from him in a perfect universe. That's where things started. In Ezekiel chapter 28, it's talking about one of his heavenly sons, one of the angels that he created, and placed him in the Garden of Eden, the Garden of God. It calls him there an anointed cherub who covers. In other words, he was taking care of the place, looking out for the place. Now, that's not bad duty, I don't think. After all, the garden was a paradise, beautiful place to be. You were the anointed cherub who covers. I established you. You were on the holy mountain of God. You were perfect in your ways from the day you were created till iniquity was found in you. See, there's kind of an amazing thing that Yahweh, when he created his heavenly sons and when he created his earthly sons and daughters, he did not hold back from us even the most godlike quality that exists, which is the ability to make a choice. And he put no restrictions on that. Every intelligent creature has been given that ability to make a choice. And with that, every intelligent creature is able to choose to go another way than to follow Yahweh. So Yahweh created all of these heavenly beings perfect, our first parents perfect, but with this possibility that they could choose something different. Now, how is that perfection? Well, it's perfection because it's the only way that love could enter the universe. And love is the main characteristic of our Father in heaven. If you cannot choose to love him, then you can't really love him, can you? Then you're just a robot that does whatever he says because you must. How satisfying is that? If you're a guy, do you want to have a wife with a big key on her back that you can turn and then she just does everything you want? Is that going to be emotionally satisfying to you? How about a husband like that? Well, there are some husbands like that, but they should wake up. It's very important to be able to make choices. And so for love to exist in the universe, free will had to exist. That was the situation. And I think it's so amazing about Yahweh that, of course, when he gave us this gift, he knew what could happen. But he gave it to us anyway. That's how important it was for him to have a family, to risk that. And you know what? We risk that too when we have a family. When we get together, a husband and wife get together, they have that potential of having children. And you know what? One of your children could end up being a serial killer, right? Adolf Hitler. Can you imagine how his mother must have felt? You know, we take the chance that maybe our kids are going to be one of those people. And we take the chance because we want to have a family. We want to experience the love of a family. So we're not much different, really, are we, when you think about it? Well, anyway, talking about Lucifer. How you have fallen from heaven, O Lucifer. You have said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I'll be like the Most High. Lucifer wanted a promotion. He wasn't happy with his assignment because he thought he was too good for that assignment. He thought he would be a lot better being God. That's what was in his heart. So, feeling that way, feeling envious, he set out to do something about it. You know, this is how betrayal happens, by the way. People don't just betray somebody. It's because they have jealousy in their heart. They have animosity in their heart and other base emotions that they create in their heart based on selfishness. It's always based on some level of selfishness. So that's what happened with him. That's what happened with him. So this is how he became Satan. The word simply means adversary. This is how he became Yahweh's adversary. So he was Yahweh's creature. Yahweh didn't do anything evil to him, but he became Yahweh's adversary. So before he ever did anything evil, he had made himself Yahweh's adversary. And he's called the devil, diabolos in Greek. Slanderous, accusing falsely, devil. So this name comes from what he actually did. He began his treacherous rebellion deceiving our first mother in the garden. Now, she was an amazing creature, perfectly innocent in every way because there was no evil. So she had no reason to think that anyone was going to come along to deceive her. And there were many wonders in the garden, so the fact that a snake started talking to her didn't raise any red flags, as it probably would for you. And later, when she was questioned about what she did in disobeying God, she says, the serpent deceived me and I ate. She was deceived. You know, even when you're deceived and you do the wrong thing, you still did the wrong thing, and there will be consequences. His rebellion grew more when the man followed the woman into betrayal. See how well he thought this thing out? The man said, the woman whom you gave to be with me, she gave me of the tree and I ate. Oh, God, it's your fault. You gave me this woman, and she did this. God gets blamed. The man does the wrong thing because he doesn't want to displease his wife, but rather than owning it, he blames God. So this is how the whole world entered into rebellion, treachery against our Creator. This was not a great start for our world. And this is how things started out in this world. The world we live in today, the world that is ruled by the devil. Well, from here, it only got worse. The scriptures tell us how the devil's rebellion, treachery, unfolded, how his plan to raise himself up above the Creator unfolded. Tells us about the sons of God. They saw that the women in the earth were beautiful, and they took the women for themselves. Now, it's kind of interesting that today a lot of people would look at that and they would say, well, what's wrong with that? Well, this was not a movie, friends. The angels who did not keep their proper domain left their own abode. You see, they were created for heaven. They were created with duties before the Almighty. And they abandoned their position in order to satisfy their desires. They betrayed the living God, is what they did. So now we have a rebellion that's spreading because of one being's selfishness spreading to others in both the earth and the heavens. At that time, the world ignored their Creator, and they basically went on an orgy of the flesh, is what they did, led by these demonic spirits in this spirit of rebellion. And the scripture says, every imagination of the thoughts of man's heart was continually only evil. Yahweh was sorry that he had made man. It grieved him in his heart. He felt that. He felt that betrayal. He was grieved in his heart because the evil, the wickedness, was nothing he ever wanted to have happen. It was a betrayal. He felt forced. He didn't want to bring the flood onto the earth. He was forced to do it, or to see everything that he had made permanently destroyed. Fortunately, being God, he foresaw these events, and through a righteous line, he raised up Noah. And the scripture says Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time. Noah walked with Elohim. Noah is an amazing man because he proves for us that even imperfect people can walk with Elohim. That's a wonderful thing to know, isn't it? Peter wrote about this. He said, Elohim waited patiently in the days of Noah while the ark was being built. I'm thinking maybe he's waiting patiently for the remnant to get their act together. In it, few, that is 8 souls, were saved through water. How ruined was that whole world? It got down to the wire, didn't it? Yahweh totally betrayed by an entire world. It only took a few hundred years for mankind to spread on the earth. Well, I wouldn't put it that way, really, to generate many people in the earth. And however, they all chose to live in one place. And It says in Romans about them what they did. It says, knowing Elohim, they didn't glorify him as Elohim, neither gave thanks, but became vain in their reasoning, and their senseless heart was darkened. They became fools and traded the glory of the incorruptible Elohim for the likeness of an image of corruptible man and birds and four-footed animals and creeping things. They fell victim to false worship and idolatry. And the reason this happened, according to the best historical sources we have, is they were angry at God for having brought the flood. And they were in fear that that could happen to them if they didn't do what God wanted. And so they set about building a tower into the heavens that they thought would be up above the place where God could destroy them, and they could get in touch with other gods whom they represented as figures of men, birds, animals, and so forth. False gods. That's what they did. And so, in a very short time after the flood, the world again treacherously turned against their Creator. Can you imagine anybody being betrayed to such an extent? Yahweh didn't destroy them. You know what he did is he was planning on how to bring them back. Can you even believe it? Well, Yahweh set about, he chose one nation to be his own nation out of all of the nations of the world. He raised up a nation, a new nation, to be his, the nation of Israel. And after miraculously saving them from slavery, he brought them to Mount Sinai, and we know what happened. There he offered to them the opportunity to be his special nation. But to be his nation, they had to be like him. They had to be righteous. That was important. So they needed to obey him. They needed to obey his covenant. But if they would do that, they would be his nation out of all the nations of the world, his own special possession. A set-apart nation. So Moses presented this to the nation. They had free will. They could say no. But they didn't say no. They said, all that Yahweh has spoken, we will do. And they entered into that covenant to be Yahweh's special nation. Shortly after this, Yahweh called Moses to come up onto the mountain so that he could set down the requirements of the covenant. And while Moses was up on the mountain, they decided to have a party. That quickly. They betrayed him. And they took up a false god to worship, a god of their own creation that they called Yahweh. And after that, they learned their lesson and they never did it again. That must be some other nation, because it isn't Israel. This was just the beginning, wasn't it? Of just a very long list of betrayals. Now, you know what? We here own that we are Israel. So this isn't fun to consider that this is what our nation has done. Constantly, through the many, many generations, betraying Yahweh. More than any people in the whole world, we need to be forgiven. Isaiah 53, 5 and 6 says, He was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought our peace was on him. And by his wounds we are healed. All we like sheep have gone astray. Everyone has turned to his own way. And Yahweh has laid on him the iniquity of us all. This is talking about Israel here. It does have a wider application, certainly, to every sinner. But in context, in the book of Isaiah, chapter 53, this is talking about Israel. The very reason that he came is because his own nation were a nest of betrayers. So facing Judah with that crowd on that night was a small thing in a way for him, because he was very used to all of the betrayal of his people. And he actually came because of it. He actually came to take the guilt of that betrayal and the punishment of that betrayal upon his own self. And that's the part of the story that I think we always need to remember when we read about what happened on that night, and why he simply stepped up the way he did, knowing everything, as it says. It was very deliberate what he was doing. Clearly, he was in charge. There's all these people with all their weapons and their torches, but clearly he was in charge. And he was doing it for us. Nevertheless, there are consequences that come to betrayers. In Isaiah 28, it prophesies about the events that happened that night and subsequently. It says, "Therefore, hear the word of Yahweh, you scoffers that rule the people in Jerusalem." Very specific, isn't it? The rulers in Jerusalem who are scoffers. It makes us think about how they taunted Yeshua. "Because you have said, we've made a covenant with death, and with hell are we in agreement." When the overflowing scourge passes through, it won't come to us, for we have made lies our refuge, and we've hidden ourselves under falsehood. They made a plot, they made a plan, a conspiracy against the King of Glory. They made a covenant with death. And somehow they thought that that was going to keep them from being destroyed by the Romans, but actually it guaranteed that they would be. "Therefore, thus says Adonai Yahweh, behold, I lay in Zion for a foundation a stone, a tried stone, a precious cornerstone of a sure foundation. He who believes shall not be disturbed. I will make justice the measuring line and righteousness the plumb line. The hail will sweep away the refuge of lies, and the waters will overflow the hiding place. Your covenant with death shall be annulled, and your agreement with hell shall not stand. When the overflowing scourge passes through, then you will be trampled down by it." And history tells us exactly what happened. It was just this. It was the flood of the Roman armies that came through, bringing the results of their evil scheme on their own heads. This is what happens to betrayers who deliberately betray the will of God for their own selfishness. And this is what happened. Very similar for them as what happened to Judas. Too late, he came to see what he had done, but he wasn't really sorry. He just couldn't live anymore. Well, as we think about betrayal, sometimes we think, well, that was back then. And the scriptures tell us that in the last days, grievous times will come. And it tells us that men will be traitors. Yeshua talked about this time, and he said, many will fall away and will betray one another and hate one another. It's talking there about believers who will fall away from the faith, become betrayers, actually hating one another. Now, that's hard to imagine. And you know, what you have to realize, friends, is that this is the inspired word. So as much as we don't want this to happen, the fact is, it's going to happen. And it's very likely that this will happen to you. That either you will be one who is betrayed, or you will be one of the betrayers. Because this is the nature of the pressure that is going to come on believers. This is what is ahead. Yeshua said, brother will betray brother to death, and a father his child, and children will rise up against parents and have them put to death. This is a real thing. So when we read about what happened to Yeshua and how he faced his betrayers, we're reading about something that at whatever level it happens in our lives is going to affect us. It will. It's coming. Betrayal is coming. So what do we do to deal with that? Surely this isn't a happy thing to think about. But like so many things that are serious, they're much better to be dealt with ahead of time, to be prepared. You know, Yeshua was prepared. He knew everything that was going to happen. We have these facts written down in scriptures for the same reason, so that we know it's going to happen. And that allows us to be able to make preparations. So here's some things that the scriptures say to help us with this. In Hebrews chapter 3, it gives this history of the betrayal of Yahweh by Israel. And then it says, beware, brothers, lest perhaps there be in any one of you an evil heart of unbelief. Now, in our modern age, we don't normally think of unbelief as being from an evil heart. But the scriptures don't lie. It is evil not to believe in the Son of God, particularly if you have confessed belief in the Son of God. In falling away from the living Elohim, but exhort one another day by day, so long as it is called today, lest any one of you be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. You see, that's what happened to Judas, isn't it? He was hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. he had the same opportunity as any of the apostles did. He heard the same message, saw the same miracles, but he also liked to steal from the money box. And he even made up lies, didn't he, in order to be able to do it. And when he saw the opportunity to make a good profit off of Yeshua, well, that deceitfulness of sin was already built up in his heart. So we have to be careful of unbelief, the deceitfulness of sin. For we have become partakers of Messiah if we hold fast the beginning of our confidence firm to the end. So what I see happen a lot is that when believers start out, they're very excited about Messiah. They're very excited about the truth. But what happens over time? Many times, they get drawn back into the world. Their first love wanes. Other things take over. Anxieties of life and desire for the pleasures of the world and so on. And pretty soon, their level of faith is not what it was when they started out. And so we have this warning. We've become partakers of Messiah if we hold fast the beginning of our confidence firm to the end. You see, we can't just depend on chance on this. If you want to be one of these people, you have to decide this is what you're going to do, and you need to make it happen. And how do you make it happen? Well, here's some other verses that I think are really great. Colossians chapter 2, it says, therefore you receive Messiah Yeshua Adonai, walk in him, rooted and built up in him, and established in the faith, even as you were taught, abounding in it in thanksgiving. You see, this is a walk, isn't it? It's not a one-time thing. It's a walk, walking in him and rooted in him. Your life is actually rooted in Messiah and comes out of him. This is really the same kind of language as when we were talking about the vine and the branches, right? The branches, they come out from the vine. If they're cut off from the vine, they can do nothing themselves. So it takes care to stay rooted in the vine. That's what it's talking about. And then being built up in him. See, the more we keep doing that, the more that we keep walking in him, being rooted in him, then there's a growth from him. His life comes through more and more in our life, and we're built up in him. And our life actually becomes a manifestation of him. That's what we need for the long haul. That's who we need to be. Established in the faith. And then I think this is so important, abounding in it in thanksgiving. You know, one of the things that misled Lucifer really was a complaining spirit, right? He wasn't happy with his job in the Garden of Eden. He thought he was worthy of something more. So that kind of created this idea inside of him where he was discontented. Well, we don't want to be like that. We need to acknowledge every good thing that comes from our Father and abound in thanksgiving. Because if we do, if we live in that place of thanksgiving, of thanking him for everything we have, of seeing all the blessings that he's giving us and constantly crediting him for that, that really is such a safeguard against that unbelieving heart that can lead us astray. So what wonderful words here. And then it goes on and it says this, be careful that you don't let anyone rob you through his philosophy and vain deceit after the tradition of men. There's all kinds of that out there, friends. All kinds of that. Philosophy, vain deceit. See, this is the reason why all of that is out there. People are trying to get your attention. They want your likes on their videos, okay? They want to have views on their videos, putting it in the 21st century idea. They're trying to get you on board with them. So what are they going to use to do that? The same thing that Satan uses, right? Deception, telling you the things that you want to hear. Don't just believe it because it's on YouTube, please. Philosophy and vain deceit after the tradition of men. Because what do you have? In him all the fullness of deity dwells bodily, and in him you are made full. You see, your focus needs to be on Yeshua Messiah because he's got the goods. He doesn't just have some lie, he's got the goods. He is the very expression of deity itself. If he lives in you, you've got everything you need. So this is the answer. Living in this oneness with Yeshua. That's what will keep you safe in the event that you are betrayed, or even worse, God forbid, that the enemy should ever try to tempt you to become a betrayer. This is what will keep that from happening. I think it's something to really think about. It's something to pray about as well. And I think the prayer ought to be, please help me to never be a betrayer. That's the worst thing. You know, that's far worse than being betrayed. Far worse than being betrayed is to become a betrayer. Let us just pray that we can stay solidly grounded in Yeshua, and that we can never be one of those betrayers that broke the heart of our Father.
You have been listening to Hebraic Insights in the Gospels. That's the end of today's program. Some of the scripture verses referenced in today's program are John chapter 18, verse 1 through verse 27, Acts chapter 24, verse 5, Isaiah 9, verse 6, Isaiah chapter 11, verse 1, Matthew chapter 2, verse 23, Exodus chapter 3, verse 13 through verse 15, Ezekiel 28, verse 13 through verse 15, Isaiah 14, verse 12 through verse 14, Genesis chapter 3, verse 12 through verse 13, Genesis chapter 6, verse 1 through verse 9, Jude chapter 1, verse 6, 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 20, Romans chapter 1, verse 21 through verse 23, Exodus chapter 19, verse 5 through verse 8, Isaiah 53, verse 5 through verse 6, Isaiah 28, verse 14 through verse 18, 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 1 through verse 5, Matthew chapter 24, verse 10, Mark chapter 13, verse 12 through verse 13, Hebrews chapter 3, verse 12 through verse 14, and Colossians chapter 2, verse 6 through verse 10. Further teachings and study materials on the divinity of Yeshua Messiah in prophecy, what prophecy from Genesis to Revelation foretells about the restoration of the remnant of Israel, Nazareth and the sect of the Nazarenes, the Davidic covenant and its relevance throughout history, the rebellion at the Tower of Babel and its impact on the world and Bible prophecy today, the rebellious schisms away from Messiah's teachings and established leadership after the 1st century, more on the history of betrayal and rebellion against God by Jews, Christians, Messianics, humanity, and so on, the terms of the covenant, walking with God in the Holy Spirit, a verse-by-verse study of the Torah and its value in understanding spiritual warfare and God's standard of righteousness, salvation and its connection with Israel and its basis in the Torah, God's plan for His remnant nation of Israel in these last days, other end times prophecy, and more on how to be prepared for the days ahead, along with many other teachings and topics, can all be found at our membership site, Tsiyon Tabernacle. Sign up is free. Just go to Tsiyon.net. That's TSIYON.net. New programs in the Gospels will be airing every Sabbath right here on Zion Road Radio. Tune in next Shabbat to learn more Hebraic insights in the Gospels. Shabbat Shalom!
Stand at the crossroads and look. Ask for the ancient paths.
Is Gog of Magog Russia? If not, then who is Gog of Magog, and how do we know? Are there any other places in biblical prophecy that can give us more details? Where does Gog of Magog fit into the timeline of prophetic events? And what relevance does Gog of Magog have to the remnant of Israel? Learn the answers from Eliyahu ben David's seminar entitled Prophetic Fulfillments Just Ahead, available as part of our free video course, Zion Fast Track. Zion Fast Track is available to all members of our community site, Tsiyon Tabernacle, and includes our most vital seminars and presentations for these last days. Membership sign-up is free and easy. To sign up and learn more about what other free resources are available to all Zion Tabernacle members, go to Tsiyon.org and click Join Us. That's Tsiyon.org, spelled TSIYON.org. Then click Join Us.
Come away right now. Away, my beloved. Come away, my beloved. What have you sown but seeds of doubt? I hear your cries and shut them out. Tear down the walls of Babylon and let her sink, washing in my word can rid you of the stink. You have bought insurance in the fear of losing it all. Come on and lose it all. Unless you give it up, it only proves that you never heard the call to come away. Come away, my beloved. Away from falling Babylon. She's a whore that has you bound. Come away right now. Away, my beloved.